Hello, and welcome to another episode of my Singularity Let's Play. This is Northstar. Hope you folks are well and taking care of each other. I am here working through the money exploration event again. Yeah, this one comes up periodically. Money. I do wish I had more of it because, or a source of it. Because this YouTube hasn't yet reached the point to monetize, and too often I find myself looking forward with dread to the future financially because I'm disabled on COVID, unable to do most jobs, and, you know, I pay rent to keep a roof over my house, but most rents are greater than the amount of money SSI provides. And got screwed out of SSDI, though it's much less than SSI normally. At least at the lowest level I would have gone. Because one of the jobs I worked for university was a grad student. Well, two of the jobs I worked, both of them, that would have earned payroll tax. Would have paid payroll tax and earned SSDI work credits. Normally did not pay payroll tax or earn work credits because of a rule added by Newt Gingrich in the mid-90s that excludes such jobs. So I got screwed since between that. Spent a lot of time in grad school. Getting stuck in a rural area for a while when there weren't a lot of jobs around. And even now, like, it's ridiculous that whenever I bring up the situation, some people is like, oh, just apply this job. Oh, maybe this insurance can be this. There's always people lined up to do these jobs. They have their pick of applicants, and most companies are not going to hire a disabled person unless there's someone who, is minded to make sure they're not discriminating against the disabled in hiring. If the disability would affect job performance anyway, they're not going to hire someone. Even though still may be able to contribute, but just, less valuable. And if they're paying the same wage regardless, they're not going to do it. So there is like an SSI, SSDI, Social Security Administration Ticket to Work program that exists, but you have to get approved for SSI or SSDI first. I don't know if you actually have to be receiving SSI, which would suck, because even when I'm like approved, you don't get money until your savings are very low. I shouldn't have to wait till that point to partake in such a program. As soon as they say I'm qualified, which they fucked me over. Excuse me. Originally where I was before, in a different location now, but they're being very uncooperative, and they claim I requested paperwork that they didn't on both SSDI and SSI, and I knew I wasn't going to get the SSDI anyways because of the work credit thing. But with SSI, I had to submit the paperwork. I think they're missing because they didn't request it, but that doesn't mean they weren't missing something. So I looked at what paperwork they might have been missing. Appeal decision, submitted some of that, working on the rest. They can't just instant reject it again, and that gives me time to do anything that could be missing, and if they still, well, then I'll have to bring the Attorney General in or something, but they're rejecting it, but they're not, or Ombudsman, but they're not saying what they're missing. They may be lying. There may not actually even be anything missing. But I don't know. I don't know if it's people at the national office or the local office, or they contract out, make these decisions. If it's the local office, where I am now is a much better local office, and I suspect they will at least tell me what they're missing if there is something missing, and they won't fuck with me because this local office has much better staff than the one where I was before when I was living with a family member who was abusive. Not really high-level abuse. I have to sometimes emphasize this because I'm assiduously honest. I'm sure some dishonest people would exaggerate the extent of things. Of course, maybe my standards of what constitutes abuse are off Maybe people would say it's more abuse than I thought, or less, but, you know, my honest assessment is it was a low level of abuse, and it was due to the added stress of me being disabled with long COVID and that just being too much of a family member who'd been through some serious trauma themselves, and just, I mean, I didn't make it better by sometimes talking about how worried I was about the future, which probably put extra stress on this person, and may have driven them to some of the abuse. Not that that excuses it, but it does remind me why some may be surprised when I have very left-wing views to learn that I'm a Christian, because the right wing has co-opted Christianity, so somehow if you're left-wing you must not be a Christian. That's bullshit. Of course, some people equate being Christian with just going to a local church, and just, it's more of a cultural thing than actual belief in what's written and prayer and, you know, real faith, and that pisses me off. But no, Christianity is faith, it's not a culture. That's wrapped up with like white nationalist bullshit. Of course, minority groups too, but I guess it's wrapped up with conservatism and like political conservatism and going to church and then just being a quote certain kind of person. That's not what Christianity is. It's a faith. It's a belief in God and Jesus and, you know, Bible. And in many cases, my interpretations of that are going to run counter to many of the conservative people. And since they've taken over too many of the churches in the US, it's hard to find. I found ones that see things similar to myself, but they're not many. Like a church at a university once, and another one in a college town. And yeah, I mean, churches that have very high proportions of extremely educated people tend to actually have more left-wing interpretations of the Bible, and some of the same interpretations I do. But, you know, you can't just magically count on finding those people everywhere. It's not a college town now. Well, you know, I'm not going to find likely a church community like that. Anyways, but yeah, it's written what Jesus says, and this is a piece of wisdom whether you're a Christian or not. Let tomorrow worry about itself, for today has enough worries of its own. Very closely paraphrased. So it may not be the exact word for word. Some people take pride in, no, the meaning is what's important. And the exact words, let tomorrow worry about itself, are definitely there. And I can capture the meaning for sure, so you get the idea. Can only sometimes just cause problems for ourselves. Whether talking about our worries, stressing people around us, or ourselves. I'm in a tough situation now. Feels very much like society is trying to, you know, beat down on me, and part of this is because I've suffered some bullying and harassment just trying to find roommates in there. Yeah, like Facebook Marketplace and shit, and people just being obnoxious, like random people messaging me and just verbal abuse from complete strangers because they don't like the way I look, apparently. Insulting me on my appearance. That is juvenile and barbaric, and they can go fuck themselves. They have no right to treat people they don't even know that way. But Facebook doesn't take its moderation duties seriously unless it's like moderating people for political opinions they don't like. Left-wing ones, never right-wing. The far right runs rampant on Facebook. But, you know, I've reported people like this, nothing ever happens to them. Even if they're like randomly messaging me and like saying toxic messages, or ask, okay, so where you're living habits, and one of them, what are you, gay? First of all, were you born last century? Calling someone homosexual is not an insult. I mean, it is because it's being used that way, but it's not appropriate, or just shows how uncouth and ignorant this person was. But I don't think this person was in good faith to begin with, so like one person doing that. But yeah, bullying gets to me too often, and I've suffered a lot of it in my life. Even when I'm doing perfectly innocent things like looking for roommates, it's the worst. And then, fear of the future. But, I gotta focus on what I need to do now. That is, although there are some things I'm taking care of with, like following up with the Social Security Administration and my student loan company and stuff, like housing assistance applications. They already did some bullshit. If I submit a paper application, then they create an online profile and then said I had to sign up and respond to an online message, even though I didn't sign up online or apply online within 30 days. But then when you search for the application, you can't find the application. So it's like, what the fuck? I can't access. I'm not going to do an entirely new application and create problems with there being duplicate stuff. So I have to contact the people. It's currently a weekend, but when the week rolls around and be like, what the hell is this? I don't know what it's trying to send me. It's completely inappropriate to demand that people, maybe someone doesn't even have access to internet, applied in paper. No right to force me to reply something by a certain timeline online and then not even be able to find the application. Like the system, enter my name, like Social Security number correctly, and it doesn't find anything. That's someone must have typed it into the system wrong, is my suspicion. Like misspelled my name or I don't know. The bureaucrats are overworked, and even kindly ones who are trying to help can make screw-ups like that. So that's assuming they are and aren't just putting a kind face on, and some bureaucrats are very hostile, but I tend to give people the benefit of the doubt if they at least pretend to be helpful, that they are actually trying to be helpful, and sometimes they get burned. I'm trying to see how some of these fucking bureaucrats are trying to screw you, but they just have enough common sense to smile when they do it. But some of them do try and help. And, I try and believe people when I can. Trust but verify is of all freaking people Ronald Reagan said. So, try and show some trust, but I also do what I can to verify that people really are acting in good faith, including government bureaucrats. Problem is not government, though, as Reagan tried to claim. The problem is capitalism. It is what has poisoned government. I mean, government doesn't work correctly and shit, but it's because, the pressure on welfare agencies is to give out as little money as possible and to make things hard and difficult and stressful for people so they'll give up and keep them understaffed. So even when people try and help, they can't do a good job because they don't have enough people. And this is all so that people will be desperate to work, even more desperate than they would if there was a good welfare system, because people are going to want to work regardless. I mean, I would very much like to get this ticket to work thing and be able to get some actual help and enforcement with getting disability accommodations, because no employer is going to provide that. If I just applied to something, they never get back to me. I mean, they know, because, I have to list stuff about disability accommodations. They'll need it. Because obviously there's a huge gap in my work history because I've been disabled and unable to work all this time. Was even somewhere where I had public transit before or access to my car, which the family I was staying with was always using to get to work. It's just not like I could have done stuff before, but now, I don't know, at least somewhere where there's maybe a little more, maybe, well, there is a little more public transit I can get some places. Not suffering the abuse, I have enough mental energy to maybe even some work from home stuff. The point being, though, I mean, and disability is a perfectly legitimate reason to have a gap in your work history, sickness, but you're not going to get it. I'm not going to get anything if I just say nothing about it. If I explain it, they're going to discriminate against disabled people, even though that's illegal. It's something like the ticket work program is the only way they have experience with, making sure employers actually follow the law. And we'll make sure, I mean, you need help. This is not something disabled people can do on their own. That's why these laws and these systems were created in the first place, and do indeed pay for themselves by helping disabled people get work at higher rates. That wouldn't be the case if people could just do it on their own. That assistance helps, action matters. So, yeah, anyways. But because it's hard just to even get through the, application process for like SSI and with bullshit that they pull too often, and you can't do the ticket to work thing until you qualify for that. You can see how people can't even access that. The system is intentionally poisoned and not made to work correctly. To serve the interests of billionaires, not to serve the interests of the voters, because what the voters think doesn't matter. Studies have shown this. So with the interests of the top 10% of the population to some degree, and especially the top 1% of the population, what they think, those are the only thing that affects politics in the US. Because they control the two parties, and we are stuck with the two-party system. Because they buy politicians with money that's used to buy political ads. And this is complicated by like Americans having shit understanding history and politics, and so being easily swayed by political ads, whereas if they had more understanding, more Americans actually educate themselves about these things and try the politics is stupid bullshit line or history is bunk, then it would be a lot harder for, money to buy politicians because political ads would be less important to buy. But when you have ignorant assholes who don't want to learn about these things but will still show up to vote if they see a political ad that misrepresents things about usually, attack ads against someone, but sometimes get out the vote type ads. Well, anyways, so, I mean, it's not just on TV, it's a lot of bullshit on Facebook and far-right propaganda networks being funded by money from donors and such. And consultants for the Democratic Party, they love their political consultants. In fact, they even let consultants basically tell them how to handle the pandemic, political consultants instead of experts in, viruses. And this is part of why Biden mishandled COVID, which he did. He absolutely mishandled it. Had to do with declaring the pandemic essentially over before it really was. Had to do with not acknowledging that COVID was airborne for as long as it happened. This was because he was listening to a political consulting firm that was advising him this way. I mean, this came out. This was leaked or something. I mean, this is fact now, but it's not something most people know about, apparently. Some shitty consulting group. I mean, the Democratic Party has a long history of this. They love their consultants more than they care what the voters think. They care what their consultants think, which goes with the whole technocratic nature of the Democratic Party. And in that way, they kind of lean fascist. The Republicans are more lean into the racism of fascism and the nationalism. But fascist movements always had a technocratic, ordinary people are too stupid to make decisions undertone to them. In fact, there was literally a fascist group in Canada called Technocracy that one of the PayPal mafia guys, like father, was in before moving to South Africa. It was a fascist pro-Nazi organization in Canada before World War II. And it was called Technocracy because there's a strain of fascism that thinks that ordinary people are too stupid to control society, and therefore there should be an authoritarian government. And that's the kind of fascism the Democrats tend towards, rather than the racist fascism. But it's still fascism. It's still vile. Most people don't even understand what fascism is, though. So you try and tell them there's different strains of it like this, and they'll look at you like you're a third eye. They don't understand. They hear fascism and all they can conjure up in their mind is Hitler, and not like any of the other fascist movements that exist in their history, because they don't know about them, because they don't know their history. This is why knowing history is so important. Otherwise, if history doesn't repeat itself, but as Mark Twain said, it certainly does rhyme. History may not repeat itself, but it certainly does rhyme. That was Mark Twain. Just to say, things don't exactly happen the same way, but they happen similarly. Repetitively. Anyways, but yeah, things have been tough here, and it's very isolating. It's tough. I mean, I was in for a rough ride even before I got long COVID. I, for instance, had always had trouble with being like somewhat socially marginalized, bullied, had some trouble with dating. And partly that was people mistreating me because I wasn't successful in my career, not treating me like I mattered. When I was on the verge of entering MD and was getting there, I was finally being taken more seriously. Nothing about me changed other than where I was in my career. But I was having a lot more success because people are shitty about that. There's a lot of people call it materialist, but that's not what the word materialist means. Although it's misused a lot. Even sometimes by academic sorts, especially by academic sorts, because the actual meaning of the word materialist is wrapped up with Marxism. Like there's this something Sturmer guy, he's like at the University of Southern Denmark, visiting scholar there or something. He's like a lecturer at John Hopkins, and he's been making the rounds on YouTube lately, at least on my feed. And he misused the word materialist, of course, and I don't know. He's a great example of what Michael Parenti would call anything but class analysis. He dances around issues, and the worst part is this guy clearly has some understanding of like Marxist perspectives on things, and even when they're clearly the most appropriate ones, avoids using them. In one video, he actually briefly summarized what internationalism is and how it's associated with Marxism, and he did it in like a few sentences. Clear he understood it. It's clear that it was applicable to a situation. It's clear he was refusing to use it. Of course, this is partly because if any academic does this, they'll instantly be censored, fired, treated as if they've done something wrong, because there is suppression of leftist ideas of Marxism, which does not mean Marxist-Leninism, does not necessarily mean communism. I'm a Marxist, I'm not a communist. I am a democratic socialist. Despite the film member staying with abusively, insultingly calling me a commie and being nasty to me sometimes. I mean, in itself, that's not abusive, but in the context of what was being said, it was. Of the tirades, they were sometimes completely unrelated to anything that was going on, that they would just break into against me. And yeah. I mean, no, democratic socialism is very different, but people try and boil it down as if it's the same, in bad faith. Anyways, this video is probably long enough. I don't want to post something that's so long no one will watch it. The whole point of this YouTube channel is to get large enough that I can monetize, to make ad money so I can survive, so I can pay rent, essentially. In the long run, when my savings won't last forever. So, or supplement SSI eventually. If I can get that and they don't bullshit me for too long, till I like almost can't even follow up on stuff because you don't have an address. That's hard to actually do any of these things, and that's intentional. PO boxes cost money, so this is when I took a class where this was discussed. Systems are intentionally designed to not be accessible to people without addresses, and to over rely on mail and stuff. And PO boxes aren't free. It's all to marginalize some of the most already downtrodden members of society and keep them down, so that honestly there's something that can point at for workers living paycheck to paycheck and say it can always get worse. So you better toe the line, you better do what your boss says, you better not get involved in a protest against this mass murder on the other side of the world, or this unpopular war or whatever, because then we'll blacklist you and make sure you end up like that. That's the threat inherent in a right-wing, increasingly authoritarian capitalist country like the United States. That's why we don't have good welfare systems, why there's this marginalization. It's not the case in, say, I don't know, Switzerland or Sweden or, Denmark, but it is absolutely the case in how the U.S. system works. Well, anyways, enough of that. I wish you folks all the best. Take care of each other. Be kind to yourselves, and may you always find a guiding star to lead you home. Till next time, this Northstar I do. And best luck to you all.